afternoon, and thank you everyone for joining us for this important panel on career development. My name is Oded Shekel. I'm a head of product for HackerRank. I want to share a bit about my career development. Started about 20 years ago at Microsoft, actually working as a developer at Windows back then, Windows Vista. It wasn't my fault, but I worked there for 2 years. And then moved from development into product roles, did multiple different PM positions within Microsoft, mostly enterprise tools and services, and then decided to move down to the valley and join smaller companies. That was about 5-6 years ago. And the last change I made was about last year. I was always passionate about career development, and I decided to join HackerRank as the head of product, helping our mission of helping developers find jobs in this tech market. That's it about myself, and to introduce the panel, Prafulla.
Hi, my name is Prafulla Arvind. I am a data science manager, and I'm with VMware. And I've been here for almost 8 years now. And before I started my career with Almed and IBM Research Center, and then moved on to working at a startup for a couple of years. And I was one among the few engineers there holding the code. And soon I realized I wanted to kind of do more and get into a bigger field. And then I joined VMware. And I started as an engineer, became a senior engineer, then turned to a lead, and now I manage a team. I did drive the tools and engineering for a while at the company, and now I've moved on to dealing with data. The team focuses on mining the data and also building a data engineering platform.
Thank you.
I'm Chris Saint-Amant. I lead a front-end engineering team at Netflix. We do everything related to sign-up, payments, pricing, login, and account management. And I've been there a little over 6 years, started out as a very green engineering manager, and have learned and grown a ton in my time there. Earlier in my career, I did a whole wide range of consulting before eventually settling into focusing on consumer product experiences, which is one of the things that ultimately led me to Netflix.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sonesh. I'm at Optimizely. For those of you who don't know Optimizely, it's a digital experience platform that allows businesses to experiment with their customers' digital experiences. This includes things like A/B testing, multivariate testing, other forms of optimization and personalization. A little about my growth. Most major events in my life have been sort of accidents. So I've been at Optimizely for about 8 years, and very recently have become a VP. Before Optimizely, I did a startup again accidentally. Did that for about 4 years. We got acquired by a company. I took some time off. Discovered Optimizely accidentally as well. Interviewed with them. I thought I was interviewing for an IC role. When I got the offer letter, it said Director of Engineering. So I was like, wait a minute, are you sure? Is there a mistake? And the founders basically said, no, we believe you, and we believe in you, and this is the right role for you. And I think since then I've been seeing a lot of challenges, have overcome some, and there's more to do.
That's one good career development there.
Yeah.
So before going into the questions, I like data and I like to look at data. So I was actually trying to find, like within the research that we have at HackerRank, data for that specific, for the context of career development. So what we've created over the years are a set of reports or researches that we have collected from our community. We have a community of 6 million developers. And specifically for students, we did that research last year, and we had 10,000 people responding to the questions. And there are two questions that are very relevant for the discussion today. So the first one was, we asked those 10,000 developers, like, how do they learn to code? Where do they know how to code? And the answers were pretty straightforward, as you can see. 1/3 of them were class or structured or formal, but 2/3 of them learn to code in a self-taught environment. And you can think about all the tools and the services that exist today. The top 2 for them were YouTube and Stack Overflow. But overall, that's a very common practice today, especially for young developers, and definitely in the context of career development. The second one, which was a bit surprising in my opinion at least, and definitely relevant for students, we asked the same set of students, like, what do they look for in their job, in the next job? And think of it, those are, I would say kids by now 21, 22 years old, looking for the first full-time position and asking them, like, what are you looking for in your next job? And surprising, at least for me, it wasn't so much about comp. It wasn't so much about culture. It wasn't so much even about company fit. The one thing that highlighted more than anything across those entire 10,000 developers was professional growth and learning. So even though they are young and they're looking just at the beginning of their career, at their first job, they're already thinking about career growth. And I think it's important for us as managers to internalize it and understand it and apply that in the overall day-to-day management. And also, like looking into the specific discussion, we are in the US, I was actually trying to slice the data and see whether the responses from US students will be different in any way. And it was different. Number one for US student is not professional growth, it's something else. Anyone wants to guess? Just shout it out. Work-life balance, you said it? Great. So for some reason, students in the US are looking at work-life balance as number one reason. You can still see like professional growth is still very important for everyone, but something to take into account as well. So I'm not going to go into the research, actually dozens of questions. I just think it's a relevant context for the discussion now. And I would like to open up to the panelists. I'll start with Prafulla. A question on overall skill development. Like in my experience, what I've seen over the years, it's evolving. If 20 years ago there was software developer, then it forked into front-end and back-end, then web and mobile, and data science, and AI, and machine learning, and crypto, and like there are lots of new skills. What do you think is the role of a manager when it comes to develop those skills, the skills of his team, the skills of his ICs?
Yeah, firstly, I think it's about recognizing that there is ever-changing technology and your products needs to evolve and adjust. So as you think about dynamic services or applications or products, you also need to have a dynamic team. That means you're constantly encouraging them to read and be up to date on the current latest technologies. And we do a lot of POCs. I encourage my team to constantly work on those in parallel with the projects and have a lot of brainstorming, like open conversations, and be open to things that they're not even comfortable with, right? So, and take a lot of courses. As you said, there's quite a ton of online courses. Even read a lot of blogs, and that is something, I encourage team, and I sometimes bring it up in the Scrum. I know Scrum, you should stick to the topic, but at the end of the day, also encourage them to say, hey, what did you guys read? Like, is there anything cool that you found? So and then we have some discussions around that. So.
And how do you encourage? Like, is it more a structure, like you should read a book once a week, or like is it just a more informal encouragement? Like, how do you think of that?
I think it's like a habit that you inculcate. It really has to be part of your daily habit, what you do, right? So you come in there, you know what your work is, you look at your stories, but you also have to know what is currently going on around and talk to your peers and VMware. That way the colleagues they do a great job in having simple break room conversations, but it's about what is out there, what is that we need to keep an eye on.
Okay, makes sense. Chris, Sonesh, anything to add?
I mean, I think one way I look at this is giving people really challenging problems to solve. And so I spend less time on the specific technical skills rather than here's the problems we have to solve and setting the team up to go after those. And then they come to me with, hey, here's the technical gaps that we think we might have and how to solve this. And sometimes that might mean hiring in somebody with that skill set that the team can then benefit and learn from. Sometimes it might mean bringing in training, but I think it really starts with what are the fundamental challenges and problems that we're trying to solve, and it all kind of stems from there.
Yeah, when talking about growth, some of the advice that I give to engineers who are looking to develop specialized skill sets is that, every sort of era, let's call it 5 years, there's going to be something that is very important, very exciting, and something that's a major driver of business value. And they should invest in that, spend a couple of years or maybe 3 years developing expertise, but don't get trapped in that area. Be open to moving to other areas and develop that domain expertise. Because if you look at your career over like a decade or more, what you learn with all these diverse technical experiences is actually the kinds of things that's going to make you a 10x engineer. A lot of the interesting challenges, a lot of the interesting insights comes from the intersection, from the overlaps. And in some ways, throughout this journey, you'll realize that, no matter what the domain is good engineering, common sense is common sense, and you'll reinforce that.
Great. Okay, thank you. So the other aspect of skills is soft skills. Right, and for some of us, soft skills is like a black magic, like how to assess, how to measure. Chris, from your experience as a manager, like how do you think of it? How do you grow the soft skills of your team? How do you assess them? How do you evaluate? Like, what is the role of a manager in that context?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the area that I spend the vast majority of my time and energy. We've taken to calling these more core skills recently because they are, soft skills. People say, oh, they're the hardest to learn.
Yep.
But they're really core skills, and they're critical to success no matter what type of technology you're working in. And it's often the area where people need the most coaching and development in. It even goes back to our interview process where at least 50% of our interview process is actually structured around assessing those skills and not just the technical skills. That's only one part of it. When I think of the really amazing people that I've worked with, is it their amazing technical depth, or is it the way in which they communicate, the way they collaborate, the way they advocate for ideas and for change? And it's almost always the latter. I think you could take a team of mediocre engineers on mediocre technical skills, but if they work incredibly well together, they're going to be far more successful than a team of 10 amazing engineers who can't collaborate or communicate well together. Yep. So I think that's the area where I spend the vast majority of my time and energy. Yeah,
that makes sense. I can say from my personal experience, I've been in many promotion discussions for specific individuals. It was never whether is coding good enough or not good enough. It was more like, does he have those communication skills, team skills, soft skills? That was usually the make or break for promotions as well.
Yeah.
So that's talking about the skills is important, but also it's important to understand the role of managers or the specific employee when it comes to career development. Sonesh, from your experience, like what's the role of a manager? Who is accountable? Who is responsible for career development?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think about this a lot, and my thinking about this has shifted based on the situation, the state of the company, the individuals involved. Right now, really, I believe that growth is driven by the individual, by the engineer. They should own it, and they should stay committed to it. And as managers, we support them and shepherd that process. They decide sort of what they'd like to go and where they'd like to go, and we support that. That said, not all engineers actually feel comfortable owning this growth. They don't necessarily feel like that it is fine to push for growth. And I think as a manager, as managers, it's our responsibility to say, hey, it's okay for you to talk about your own growth. It's okay for you to advocate. And if they forget or if they're not very confident about that, then remind them, like, hey, how are you thinking about your growth, and what new thoughts do you have over here? So that's a piece about sort of like the role, I would say. In terms of supporting them through this growth, as you're having these conversations and sort of developing a picture of what their growth looks like according to them, I think as a manager, you can support them in a couple of different ways. Just to narrow the scope one is, I think any team, no matter what the company is going to go through some phases of stability, some phases of just like frantic chaos. And I think in either state, and you might oscillate between those two, chaos may come from many things, like engineers may leave or just priorities shift. But in every situation, there is an opportunity for growth. Like in one of the frantic chaos states, there's a chance to try something new and stretch yourself and grow. In the periods of stability, there's a chance to deepen or master your skills, and that's another phase of growth. And ultimately, I think the highest thing is through experience. I think generalizing a bit, but people tend to fall in roughly 3 buckets. One is I know what my values are, and I'm making my decisions in alignment with those values in my professional career. Those are people who tend to be fulfilled and happy. And there are people who are like, I don't know what my values are. I'm making these decisions. I'm always second-guessing them because I don't really have an anchor, and it's a process of discovery. And I think there's people who are also like, I know what my values are, but I also know that I'm not making decisions in alignment with those values, and I'm struggling because of that. And I think as a manager, it's really helpful to kind of like help people reflect and be inquisitive about sort of what state they're in to be able to help them and provide them sort of with the right growth advice.
I think what you're getting there is that growth is highly personalized, right? It has to be really tailored to what that specific person is looking for and perhaps what your specific team needs. And so I look at my role as trying to match up those two. Like there's a set of things the team needs, and there's a set of things that each person wants to grow in, and can I kind of match those up effectively?
Yeah.
And digging in, like spending time for those folks that maybe aren't asking for what they want as much, and digging in with others and saying, what is it that you want? Do you want more influence over technical decision? Do you want more impact over the product direction? Do you want to go deep in a specific technology? Do you want to grow into management someday? Do you want to increase your compensation? You know, what specifically on which facets of these are you most interested in pursuing? And then being able to kind of line up opportunities that will help them develop in whatever areas are important to them, but still in line with what the team and the business needs.
Yeah, I think asking the right questions is really a good way. And also as a manager, you have to enable some of these things. Maybe there is no opportunity. What do you do in such scenarios, right? Someone really wants to lead a team, but you actually already have 2 team leaders. And how do you encourage them to still keep up their passion towards being that, and also try to understand how they can grow across, right? So talk to different teams, different business units, and understand how they can actually make the shift if that's even available, right? So to enabling, I think, is one of the things that we really should keep an eye on for these folks.
Yeah, and I think staying plugged into what's happening across your organization or across your company as well, because maybe the best growth opportunity for them isn't on your team.
Exactly.
And you can find a better place for them, which will be a much better outcome for the business than having them go get that growth outside of the company.
Yeah, a huge +1 to that. I mean, I think, as I fully agree with all of you that growth is highly personalized, and one sort of unified way to look at this, despite the differences in the situations, is that we're trying to grow them to be the best versions of themselves, whether it's for your team or someone else's team, or even actually in the long term for another company. And I think to be able to help them become the best versions of themselves, and maybe that might spill over into other areas of their life, I think that is a key defense to the, I guess one of the core beliefs that Plato was founded on, which is like, hey, people leave managers, not companies. And I think, being able to provide that kind of a service is very essential. It's also a really great tactic in a very competitive recruiting market where, you can't afford to lose anybody.
Yep.
Yep.
It's interesting, all 3 of you touched on the need, or the essential need, to develop an open communication with your team on their career development, right? And creating that open communication allows you to have this constructive discussion on what dimensions of growth are you looking for, whether it's my team, whether it's outside the team, and what's the right thing to do to get the better version of yourself. So skills is important, communication is important. Another interesting dimension for career development is overall how to adjust to the specific need of the individual. And specifically, I want to think of generations and how to address needs of different generations. So talking about Gen Z are the oldest Gen Z now are 22 years old. Those are the new entrants to the market. They're actually entering now, coming out of college. And I can share a story that's related, and then ask whether there's any application here for career development. So I heard this story this week. It was an intern in Google, and he came to Google in the morning, and he saw in the kitchen there was a big jar of strawberries. In the afternoon, he came to his manager, and he said, I'm the intern, I don't like strawberries, and it's winter, and I prefer hot, food or drinks. Can I get reimbursed for the strawberries I didn't eat? True story. I heard it secondhand, but I trust the source. But I think the question is, how do you think about the new generation of developers, especially those who are highlighting the need for career growth as they enter the market? On the one side, they are junior, just coming out of college. They might have a few years of experience, not professional experience. On the other side, they do expect a lot, or they expect something that like 10 or 20 years ago, developers didn't expect. So what's your experience in that, Prafulla?
So a lot of the times you think that people who are fresh out of colleges, they don't know things, but that's changing. As the awareness is growing, they make it a point to know where they are, what they want to be. They have aspirations, and they come with a lot of expectations. And it's good to know them from beforehand to see why they chose this company, what is their passion towards, because you want them to be productive. You want them to be able to contribute, do their best, and also grow in their career. So it's very important to know that. And also there is a gap that I see between the youngsters who come in and also the folks who are pretty seasoned. And how do you bridge that gap? Because there are certain expectations that are already preset, right, from how the culture is of the team. And when the new folks come in, how do you make sure they're all comfortable, right? So you have to understand that from both the directions and bring that into play.
Makes sense. Anything to add? In your experience, like
I think the one thing that I'm noticing a lot that I'm actually very grateful for is that the younger engineers come in with some fantastic open perspectives, and I learn from that a lot. And one of the things I really, really like is that they come in with this view that it is absolutely fundamental for us to invest in diversity, equality, and inclusion. And that is amazing. Like, that is their baseline expectation, and for us to come to this point has been amazing. So.
Yep, that's interesting. Okay, so last question, and I saw it worked very well today throughout the panel. Can you share an experience or a tip or a recommendation you got throughout your career that really helped you throughout and you would like to share with the team? Sonesh?
I've been very lucky to receive a lot of good advice, picking the best one. I would say it's your success is directly proportional to the success you enable for others. So how far do you want to go? Take your actions based on that.
That's a good one.
I think for me, it's all about the best advice I received was around work-life balance. So I started out in consulting, and I was interning at this company, and I put in an incredible amount of time and energy into it. And I had a boss that, at least on the surface, looked like they did the same. And I feel like I got a lot of my kind of crazy work ethic from imitating him. And a couple of years later, I was still at the company, he wasn't, and we'd gotten together for dinner, and he asked how everything was going. I said, I'm just really stressed. I'm working crazy hours. I don't have much time for anything else outside of work. And he paused, he asked me, he says, well, what's the implication if you don't hit this deadline? And I was like, well, I guess the client will be upset. He's like, yeah, maybe. He's like, some big company will maybe make slightly less money than they would have if you deliver this thing 2 days later than what you are breaking your back to try to do. And how important is that in the grand scheme of things relative to your own health and happiness? And it really struck me, especially hearing it from somebody who I thought had like a very different perspective. And that hit me really early in my career, and I think helped give me a lot of perspective that even when it feels like everything's hitting the fan and everything's super stressful, like put your work life in perspective of what's happening in the world and what's happening in your own life.
That's interesting. Yep.
Yeah, mine's very similar to that. My manager one day, he talked to me about it, saying, "Hey, you know what? The career is not a sprint; it's a marathon. So you need to pace yourself." And I'm sure every one of you heard this phrase here and there, but it really hits you at one point when you're truly trying to figure out what you're doing, how you're working hard, and how you're compromising a lot of things to achieve your goals. And you have to be aware that it is really a long journey, right? It's how you have to plan for that. You don't want to be burnt out too soon. You don't want to run too fast and crash. So you really need to know what you want in your career and in your life, and figure out how to balance both of them. I think that was one of the great advice that I got from my manager. And another one is, stay fit. It's very simple, but do you give time for your mind and body? Stay fit, like work out. Do things that takes you out of your technical zone or whatever that you do work or spend a lot of time at. So that helps you also think clearly. One of the things that I do is I always run when I have a hardest problem to solve. And even though there's nothing that I know, it's not going to solve my problem, but it really helps me think differently when I come out of it.
Thank you. I like the running part. Something I want to share from my experience, I was talking to my mentor at Microsoft many years ago, and I remember a discussion with her on, I have weaknesses, I have strengths, like what should I invest in? Like what type of tasks should I take? What type of career choices should I make? Should I leverage my strengths? Should I try to improve my weaknesses? And her recommendation was, don't try to balance it out. Don't try to work on your weaknesses so they are as good as your strengths. Rather, her point of view was leverage your strengths as much as you can. Take the tasks that leverage your strengths, pick the career choices that can leverage your strengths, because if you work on your strengths, you'll be successful, and you can grow further. But you did say sometimes your weaknesses will be at the point where they are blocking you from further progress. And when you get to this point where your weaknesses are starting to block you, you do need to invest in those areas of improvements and make sure they can unblock further success. So that's something I've taken further from my career, and I'm recommending for my team as well. And always invest in what you like, in what you're strong at, in the highest value you can provide to your team, to your company, and identify where weaknesses can become an inhibitor or a blocker, and then invest to overall progress those. So that's it. We have 20 seconds, so I need to conclude. Thank you very much, everyone. A great discussion. Thank you, panelists. Thank you for those who stayed throughout the entire day. And we are almost the last one between you and happy hour. So if you have any questions, Oded at HackerRank.com, or just find me throughout the day. Thank you very much.
Thank you.